Dan, thank you so much for being here today and being willing to talk to our data science students and give them some words of advice. I'd love for you to start off by introducing yourself and when you graduated from GW and what you're doing now.
Hi, it's my pleasure. And my name's Dan Vitale. I graduated in 2019, and I am currently a data engineer for a company called Data Technica.
Terrific. Thank you so much. And I am going to go ahead and get right into my questions for you. The first question I have for you, in your experience, what are the must-have top few skills or experiences needed by somebody to be successful generally in a data-based industry? What do employers get really excited about when they see on somebody's resume?
I can tell you when we are hiring, we really love to see programming skills, demonstrated programming skills. A GitHub with well-documented code we're going to be looking for that first, honestly. It's very, very important. Being able to put together pieces of software that, even if it's for a one-off analysis, being able to put it together in a way that's well documented that anybody can go and understand is key. We're not looking for sort of commented lines of code, but more documentation on how to use this thing that you've put together. So that's number one. I'd say mathematical and statistical thinking is pretty key. It's a little bit harder to demonstrate on a resume or a CV or a cover letter, but really we're looking for people who can track through a project and understands the mathematical basis of a problem from the beginning to the end. So when you're sort of trying to understand the data that you're working with, understanding the distribution of every single variable, understanding how the variance in each variable pertains to sort of the variance of the dependent variables of the other variables is really important. Data exploration is key. And then when you go to apply machine learning models, when you try to build statistical models, stuff like that, really understanding why the method that you're using works with your particular data. These days it's very easy to run a grid search across lots of different models and just go with the best one. But really understanding why the model that the grid search selected works with your data is key, and it will help you to troubleshoot. This sort of dovetails with um, the last skill, which is uh, figuring out how to be curious in a structured way. What in a world where it's really easy to just sort of apply out of the box methods, it's really key for you to be asking why um, at every step of the way. Okay, and this gets complicated as you are working with larger data sets that are particularly wide. If you have a couple hundred variables, this can get a lot more complicated. But really going through and trying to understand each facet of your data is key. It's key. There's no way around it, actually. You really have to understand what's going on. You can't just dump data into a model and then go with it. This will cause problems, especially if you're working in a much bigger production environment. There's no way around that. Now, the other place where curiosity is kind of key is I know people are becoming more and more dependent on LLMs, on sort of AI coding tools, which I think absolutely use it. But you generally can't just run the code that you get. Understanding every single line of code when you're using these types of tools, this is insanely important. And being curious about how things work, why they work, um, from start to finish in your project is invaluable. Being able to ask important questions about sort of what the data means at every single step, there's no substitute for that.
Let me ask a quick follow-up to that. When you say these are really important pieces of advice, when you say that it's hard to reflect this on a resume or a CV or a cover letter, how do you get a sense of whether you think somebody's got these skills? Is it something that you can see reflected on a resume, or do you get a sense from the resume of who you want to talk to more, and then you talk about this in an interview?
It's a combination of both. I'd say if you can demonstrate that through well documented code, well documented projects in your GitHub, that's going to go really far. So, a really good structured README that explains why you're working on the project, what you've done to solve the particular problem that you're trying to solve, why the project worked. That's there, that can lay that sort of thing out in plain terms. Because if you have a successful project, a demonstrated successful project, then you are going to have gone through those steps of understanding everything across the board. So, yeah, I'd say, we rely very heavily at my company on GitHubs when they're available.
Excellent. That's great advice and something that our students can absolutely do because everybody's working on projects. Everybody should have GitHub. Terrific. Okay, next question. What are some of the ways that our students, aside from classes, obviously, can become more familiar with various data science related fields? Are there conferences, associations, resources? What do you do to stay updated?
Well, that's a good question. It's a rapidly evolving field, as you know, and I think the key to my learning process has been actually relying on online courses and textbooks. So I know that that can be maybe that's not the answer that people want to hear coming out of school, but there are certain. I go back to my deep learning textbook fairly often. I'm doing a lot of sort of end-to-end app building, data app building, hosting in the cloud. So I've relied pretty heavily on Coursera. You can find courses on basically every specific field you want to get involved in terms of specific data science skills. You can find a lot of that there. So we use primarily Google Cloud for all of our infrastructure. So I've taken maybe 30 to 50 courses on Google Cloud in on Coursera at this point. I just pay for a monthly membership and I'm on there. If not every day, at least once or twice a week, just going through stuff. One of the great things about courses like that is once you've done a handful of them, and they can be quick to accomplish, but once you've done a handful of them, you start to realize that a lot of the courses kind of there's a lot of overlap. So you've already encountered a lot of the material already, and then there's just that one specific thing that you need on that one specific tool, right? So there's, in Google Cloud, there's Cloud Run, there's Apogee, there are all these little specific tools that all kind of work the same way. So that's been very helpful. And then on the textbook side, no matter what you're trying to learn, there there's very likely a textbook out there, specifically for more computer science related topics. Um, so yeah, I'd suggest get comfortable with sort of learning on a regular basis because the growth, the change in the industry is never really going to stop.
Absolutely. So lifelong learning in the field.
Yep,
Excellent.
necessary.
So thinking about, you mentioned something about after, people coming out of school may not want to feel like they're still doing schoolwork. However, people coming out of school are going to certainly be looking for jobs. And I'd love to hear what if you were starting off now to get your first job, regardless of what your first job was, what would be some of the tips that you would maybe suggest to somebody, or as an employer, what are some of the things that perhaps you see that, you'd love to advise people not to do or to do?
Okay. Uh, sure. I'd say one of the one of the things that um, has been useful for me just career wise has been asking a question, even if it's not related to my particular job. Um, especially if you're looking for a job, it's not all about applying to as many jobs as you can, but I think one of the things that would be very helpful is to ask a question and then try to solve a problem on your own. Learning how to web scrape, learning how to access APIs for things that you might be interested in, and asking even basic but structured questions about. There's almost unlimited data available to you on the internet, so it it may not be clear at the beginning how you will solve a particular problem, or even what the actual question you're trying to answer is. But if you find yourself interested in something, go and pursue it, and create a GitHub, start documenting sort of what you're trying to do, and then go solve some problems. And then you can do everything end to end. Really, you can start from scraping, structuring, transforming, and then analyzing data. And then you can even produce apps, front end apps with tools like with AI coding tools. That something like that is easier than it's ever been. um, but each problem will provide its own sort of unique challenges. So if you have if you're on uh, if you're on X, or you're on sort of Reddit or something like that, these companies have APIs. You can grab data, you can scrape data. If you have questions that you're trying to answer, go ahead and do it and document it. That will demonstrate sort of your curiosity. You'll learn a ton along the way, and it will show employers who are interested in that sort of thing that you are asking questions, you're figuring out how to solve problems. And it will honestly, in a lot of ways, it'll mirror the actual process that you'll do in any job, actually. I'm not talking about going and taking an online course where you are just creating a GitHub from the stock project that is, that is presented in the coursework. I'm talking about going and coming up with your own questions and trying to solve your own problems. Because there's basically uh, endless data questions you can ask on the internet.
Excellent. So back to kind of that theme of curiosity and problem solving, and that being especially appealing to potential employers.
Definitely. And the other thing I'll say, something that has proved really useful at my company is the ability to network and talk to people. Um, there's a type of networking that a, a lot of people do because it's maybe the easiest, where you're trying to get something out of somebody. Um, I'll tell you that sort of networking is it's pretty obvious. It may not seem obvious when you're doing it, but the type of networking I'm talking about is asking, when you find out that somebody is in a particular field that is relevant to you, that's interesting, ask questions about what you may be interested in that field. It's not questions to sort of show off your knowledge, but to actually understand what people are talking about. If you're not in a particular field but you're interested in it, you're not going to really know anything. It's not going to be the questions that you can ask that you think might show off sort of your skills and stuff, that it's not necessarily going to help you so much. But asking questions and really trying to understand where somebody's coming from in a networking context, I think is, learning that skill is insanely important. And just being able to connect to people. It's yeah, it goes a long way.
So you're talking, I think, about authentic networking, where you really are interested in and curious about another person and their path and their work and their company, and not transactional networking where you're really just hoping to get a referral from them.
Yeah. Yeah, that's exactly right.
Makes sense. Okay, my last question. What specific action or strategy have you taken that you think's been the most impactful on your career progression or advancement?
Independent study, no doubt. It's 100% the biggest thing. What you'll find. I work for a small company. What you'll find in the field, across the board, is basically if you're growing, if you are advancing in your career, you are going to run up against topics that you've just never encountered before. You're going to run up against particular problems that you may not have encountered before. And ultimately, there's documentation, there's the the know-how is somewhere. Somebody has solved that problem that you're trying to solve. There are very unique problems that are in unique fields. My field is genetics. So you run into stuff that maybe nobody has solved before. But in terms of learning a new technology, figuring out how to do things end to end in a sort of cloud engineering context, basically when you run into something and it looks like magic and you go, I don't know how they did that, or I don't know how I'm going to solve this. That's or even, I just how do you go from sort of, you know, uh, how do you go from one step to another, especially in a large organization where you're collaborating and other people are solving particular problems and you're solving, something on the back end or something on the front end. Um, those things that you see that you don't know how they're being done, go and ask about it, go and learn how those things are accomplished. Because even if you're not going to do it directly, it may provide you insight into how to better collaborate with somebody who's solving that problem. And if you understand how a problem is solved, even if you haven't done it, you don't need to do it for your job. Being able to talk fluently about that process, how your process that you worked on connects directly with the process that's being done on another end of a major pipeline, is insanely important when you go to apply for your next job, when you go to interview, when you're talking to people in your company who may, you know, be the one to tell you that there's a job opening in their department later on, because then they'll know that you know what's going on.
Excellent advice. I cannot thank you enough, Dan, for joining me today to chat a little bit about your career and to give our students some very important advice. Thanks so much.
No problem. Thank you.